We probably did another 3-4 million in revenue in Australia this year. However, our profitability has gone like significantly, which means we'll probably make as much money as we would have last year, even though we've got significantly more revenue. That's a hit that I take, and that's good that I don't have investors or that we're an independent so that I can do that.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Agency Growth Club. This is a platform where I interview some of the most successful agency owners in the world, and we don't just talk about wins, we focus on expensive lessons, setbacks and failures that help shape the agency's growth journey, and I think that's where we learn the most from as well. So on the first episode, we have Harry Sanders, the founder of StudioHawk. StudioHawk is one of the most formidable SEO agencies in the world. We cover things like how they've added 4 million in revenue on the Australian side, how they've broken into the US market and opened an office in Atlanta, how they built the team to 70 strong, and more topics like surviving the critical 3-year mark, StudioHawk's pod system, mastering cash flow, not only in rapid growth, but also in economic downturns, which we're facing right now, hiring missteps, smart delegation, and much more, including Harry's journey from going homeless to a multimillionaire and building such a great agency. So stick around, I'm sure you will enjoy.
First question I've got for you, Harry, is have you got an example of a significant growing pain that StudioHawk has faced, and how did you overcome it? And is there anything that you would do differently?
For sure. I think one of the most significant growing pains that I don't actually see a lot of people talking about, but I could be wrong, is around this 3-year mark. And the 3-year mark of an agency is really quite infamous because your first year of an agency, to be honest, like you're probably going to be signing on a lot of clients. You're probably not going to be churning many clients because they're brand new clients. If you're churning clients as soon as you're signing them on, there's sure shit something wrong with the business, but you can listen to another podcast to figure out how the hell to fix that. But around that 3-year mark, you start having natural attrition. You know, clients aren't necessarily always going to be with you forever. You could be the best company in the world, and clients after 3 years, new marketing manager, new something, you want to change something up, new direction, they're going to find someone else. And for the first time in your business, you start sometimes churning or potentially churning more than you're bringing on, which can be a very stressful environment when you're only really used to clients in. And so that's a point where you either have to work your sales engine, your marketing engine, probably a combination of both. But one significant growing pain we had was just kind of finding that point and structuring around it. You know, we had a very flat structure in the organization, which I thought was very good because we were seeing nothing but success as a result, seeing significant growth year on year. But as soon as we hit that point of around that 3-year mark, 4-year mark, maybe, it was really difficult because we had too many cooks in the kitchen, SEO people making business decisions that they probably weren't qualified to make or didn't know what to do. And we really had to rejig a lot of that organization and create more dedicated roles and departments, which allowed us to get to the next level. But, you know, a lot of companies don't do that and they really stagnate there.
Awesome. And you mentioned there roles and departments. A big question we always get asked when we're chatting to agency owners is like what team structure works. And I feel like every agency owner I talk to has got like kind of a different team structure. They've experimented with all kind of things. So what works for StudioHawk right now?
We've always had success in like a pod structure, teams of no more than 8. You know, you shouldn't be able to have a team of direct reports more than people you could share a pizza with. And the idea behind that is any more than 8 direct reports, you can't really build camaraderie in a team. You can't build that kind of sentiment. And you can see that in the real world, you know, firefighters, police, all these things, all of them have small squads and small amounts of teams. The reason that is because you can build a lot of, you know, identity behind a team. Our teams have got different team names. There's gin links. There's, to be honest, I can't remember all the different team names, but there's the Sydney teams, the Melbourne teams, the London teams, and now the US teams. And they've all got their own identities. And that's really important. You want to embody that. We've got team leaders, and team leaders basically handle the kind of people issues, the management of their team, but they're also on billable work. And I was very intentional behind that because I think you can't be a manager unless you're kind of in the front line with your team. Their KPI based on how their team performs, all that kind of stuff. And then that reports into the head of operations. So for Australia, there's obviously head of operations, and all those different team leaders report into that person, and they go through and try their best. They're not on billable work. Their job is to kind of find ways to free up capacity to enable the teams to do more billable work, to make their lives easier, more efficient, all those different things. But that comes with growth. You wouldn't really have that when you're a small 10-person agency.
Awesome. And so cash flow is quite, it's a topic that I never really hear people talk about, especially on the likes of LinkedIn and YouTube. But yeah, cash flow can be tough, especially during rapid growth or an economic downturn, which we're kind of seeing the last maybe 2 3 years. So how has StudioHawk and yourself dealt with cash flow issues, and how did you manage them?
I think, we're essentially a professional services business, which is very fortunate from a cash flow perspective, which means that, if we're growing, we charge clients up front. So, we're month to month, all that, our revenue is not very lumpy. We just do SEO, digital PR, SEO, content, all that stuff that fits under that, SEO bucket. So it's all monthly recurring revenue. So we don't have that lumpiness of new projects coming in. So when a new project comes in, obviously we need to resource that, but we've already got money to resource that. So that's been obviously amazing, and it allowed me to bootstrap the business without any investment and scale it internationally without taking investment and to do all those good things. But in a downturn is more interesting because a lot of companies go through downturns. What do you do? How do you manage cash flow? I've always been of the mind, in a downturn, I will take the hit. Just like in an upturn, I take the profit. In a downturn, I take the hit. So profitability drops in a downturn. Our revenue's grown significantly year on year, both in the UK and Australia. We probably did another, 3-4 million in revenue in Australia this year. However, our profitability has almost gone down like significantly, which means we'll probably make as much money as we would have last year, even though we've got significantly more revenue. That's a hit that I take, and that's good that I don't have investors, or that we're an independent, so that I can do that. But that's the reality of when you're in a downturn. You have to invest in new systems, new processes, so that hopefully in 2-3 years' time, I see the fruits of that. But in business, as many people would know, it's not always just win, 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 win.
Awesome. Let's move on to hiring, Harry. I know you guys at StudioHawk take hiring very, very seriously. I remember when we first worked with you, I think you had a video under London Bridge to try and get UK SEOs to move to Australia. You guys have got a company culture handbook. Like everything's really, really good, but hiring can be very, very challenging, especially when scaling. Have you made any hiring regrets? And what advice would you give to avoid hiring mistakes?
I've made a lot of hiring mistakes, and we will continue to make hiring mistakes no matter what we do in place. Like, I used to think that we could make it work with everyone, but the reality is you can't, and you need to get these people out as fast as humanly possible because they ruin the culture for everyone. The weakest link is kind of the person that everyone looks at to go, oh, this is the bar I need to perform at. I'm doing way more than this person, so therefore I can scale back my work. So I don't care if someone's the best thing for the culture. If they can't perform and everyone else looks to them as the bar, I think they got to go. I think it's hard when you run your agency like a family, and everyone's a family, and everyone likes that word family. I think, you obviously don't want to be cutthroat, but you want to be a bit more like a sports team. You're getting paid a salary to be here. We expect you to perform. These are the standards that we perform at. These are the standards our clients expect us to perform at. It's not that, if our clients aren't happy at the end of the day, we're going to have a problem with the person managing those accounts or working those accounts. But one of the best things we did, coming back to the question, was having a rubric of what we wanted. So we've got what we don't want and what we do want. And in our interviews, so what we don't want, we call them too cool for school. We don't want people with egos that think they're better than the team or think they're smarter or talk about nonsense. And it happens a lot in SEO. Someone comes in, they're like, oh, I'm going to do log file analysis for this. And they just come up with all these really crazy terms that sound really smart. But in actual reality, they're not going to make any difference for a client. And stuff like that, where there's a lot of ego or they just think that they're better than the team, we put them in that too cool for school basket. They're too cool to do SEO. They're too cool to, whatever. Maybe find a fit at another company. We say pursue excellence elsewhere. But for us, we want wholesome nerds. That's our rubric of people. We want people that, they're nerdy about movies, they're nerdy about video games. Frankly, I don't care what you're nerdy about, but you're passionate about something and you're wholesome. Wholesomeness is about, supporting each other. No one's bigger or better than another person in the organization. We have each other's backs. We're not a party. StudioHawk's not a party culture. If you come into StudioHawk and you expect that you're working to Mad Men with his big parties and stuff, we're just not. And that's something we've owned from day dot, that we're not going to attract people that go into agencies looking for wild parties. We're looking to attract people that want strong career growth. And you know all about that, Josh, how we really meticulously plan our career growth and the amount of work that goes into that with our dedicated L&D team and all that stuff. We're here for the people that want to grow and, really we're prepared to make a really good change in their lives.
Awesome. I love that. And one thing I can attest to as well is, obviously I've been in the SEO recruitment game for just over 3 years now, and you hear a lot of stuff, and obviously there's candidates that go and you can't keep them forever. And I've never heard a bad word from any candidate say anything bad about StudioHawk. It's always, and it's not even like just normal. It's always like, honestly, man, like the growth culture, everything there, like the way everything works, it's always been really, really positive. And yeah, that's traveled overseas to where I am. So
I'm glad. Yeah. No, it's by design. Like, I used to think that this stuff just happened, but it really is. As you expand the team, you've got to be very deliberate. Company culture books, all that kind of stuff. If you want good culture, you need to, set it from the top and really lay down the foundation of what that means.
Awesome. And Harry, after running StudioHawk for coming up to 9 years now,
Jesus, yeah.
What's one key thing that you wish you knew at the start?
Man, I wish I knew a lot of things at the start. What I wish, 17-year-old me starting out, little StudioHawk. What did I wish I knew? I don't know how much of it. Yeah, look, definitely, egos in agencies. Man, dude, I think of any industry I've ever worked with, I think egos of agency owners are remarkable. I mean, guys, the industry's massive. We can collaborate, we can do things, but starting out, you think you're really hot shit because you've built an agency and you've got a few staff under your belt. I think realizing that, you might be just a big fish in a small pond, but then you take a leap and you realize there's massive agencies and people doing things. And I think stemming from that is this idea that, every agency starts, and I would have heard the same thing a million times. Why'd you start your agency? Oh, because there were so many bad agencies. Totally viable. It's a viable reason to start a business. But people don't go a step further and consider why there's so many agencies. I've never, out of all the people I've heard and asked about why they started an agency, no one has ever said to me, I wanted to start a bad agency and make money. No one. So why are there so many bad agencies? You have to consider that. And the reason why there's so many bad agencies is because people either have a real breadth of services that they can't maintain or scale. It's really hard to manage a variety of services. Maybe they scale too fast and they don't have the servicing capacity behind that. There's a million reasons. But I think putting your ego to the side and realizing what kind of agency you want to build, where are your strengths, where are your limitations? Because your limitations and knowing what you won't do is almost as important as your strengths. Like, I know we don't do paid media, and that's a limitation. But it also becomes one of our greatest strengths because it means we can double down into SEO like nobody else. So yeah, coming back to it, what would I say to 17-year-old me? Really ask yourself, okay, why are there so many shit agencies, and how do you prevent yourself from being one?
Awesome. Cool. And so my next question is, Harry, so was there a time that you felt that StudioHawk's growth was kind of stunted? And what kind of decision or strategy did, did you use to help break through that?
Yeah, there's been a couple points in the journey. Probably a couple years back, we had a real point where we've never really, touch wood, we've never really had a significant, you know, major downturn, but we've had certainly slow periods. A couple of years ago, coming back to that team structure, we had, um, too many cooks in that kind of management kitchen. Um, and I think, frankly, some people that either we weren't aligned with or they weren't aligned with the business, um, that had been there a long time and it had enormous contributions to the agency, but kind of had reached like or been in that ability of where they would align where the agency's going. Um, and so, we had a big plateau because I wasn't willing to make maybe the hard calls that I needed to make um, back then. Um, and so ultimately, I was forced to because of the growth of the business. And obviously, the business is bigger than any individual, including myself. I stepped back more from that CEO role because I was focusing on London and Australia, and I took more of that founder role, which is very different. And I set more of that departmental kind of focus and strength and took people away from billables to focus on running their departments and doing things that way. Ultimately, that allowed us to build a bigger marketing engine, um, and therefore better sales, and therefore better retention. Our retention improved massively just by having, it sounds obvious, to be having someone in charge of retention. Sales improved massively just by having someone in charge of sales, because previously we didn't have that structure. Um, and same with marketing. That allowed us to really get through those plateau periods.
Awesome. And you mentioned going from CEO step into
Mm.
founder. I'm just trying to put that in my head. I feel like I'd have a really difficult time doing that. How did you delegate that, and like how did you navigate through that?
Well, I realized one of the biggest bottlenecks in the business, if someone said to me, I was in a class at MIT, I was doing like a course there in America. Um, and the lecturer was talking about, boards and CEOs and all that kind of stuff. And they were sitting there saying, well, think about who's currently in charge of your business, even if it's you, and think about if you were objective, you were removed, you were hired as a consultant to work in this business and to come in, would this be the person you hire? Or is there someone else in the business that you think would be better? So I looked at that and I thought, you know what? Putting my ego aside, I don't like people management. I don't like going through KPIs. I don't like setting budgets. I don't like doing all that stuff. That's the role of a CEO. That's the role of a general manager. So why the hell would I employ myself to do this? No, I wouldn't, frankly. I would employ myself to strategic direction of the organization, more of a board role I would put myself in. And that was hard because so much my identity had been being the CEO of StudioHawk, calling the shots on a day-to-day basis. And if you're not the CEO, make no mistake, you don't get to call the shots. You maybe get to overrule very few things from a board level, but the actual day-to-day operations are not up to you. Who you hire, who you fire is not your choice anymore. But I looked at it and I thought, well, if I want to have a real growing organization, I'm not going to be the bottleneck of this thing. And I'm going to put my ego and my pride to the side and realize that there's a better person for this job. Hence, I put Lawrence as the general manager of Australia. Um, and since then, we've grown massively, because you've got to have the right people in the right seats, just like you've got to know where your seat is. I'm much better focused at the strategic direction. What's next? What should we be doing? Working across London to innovate, working across our expansion in the US. That's a much better role for me. Um, and yeah, it's important to know your place.
Awesome. And you mentioned Lawrence there. So
Mm.
Lawrence, I can't remember. I've heard it a few times from him where he started with you guys, and the quote that you gave him about how you want to grow him
Grow him
into
like a
a tree.
tree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like from chatting with Anthony a few times as well, it was a similar kind of story
Mm.
with Anthony, where I think he was a barman or something, and
Yeah.
next thing he's now like, yeah, working.
GM of the UK, massively growing SEO company.
Yeah. So like, do you think you got lucky with that, or have you got a strategy to bring people up, training? Like, how does that work with you?
Shit, yeah, I think I got lucky. I think anyone that doesn't think they get lucky in business is so far up their own arse that they can't see the sun shine. I think that in business you get lucky on some things. I got lucky on those. I got unlucky on a lot of other things. Believe me, it balances out. It's like roulette. You win sometimes, you lose others. But there's also a strategy behind it. So I really believe in transformational leadership. And that is, some people believe leadership is telling people what to do, which is a form of leadership. Sometimes it's a necessity, but transformational leadership is where you make a real impact on someone's lives. If you look at Anthony and Lawrence and the impact that StudioHawk's had on their life, just like StudioHawk's had on my life, it's been profound and beneficial for them. Anthony's got some stake in the UK entity. Lawrence has got some stake in the AU entity, and they've been provided numerous opportunities to kind of grow and expand and to really come into themselves. That's the kind of, if you do that, naturally people will hang around and want to reciprocate that. And I like to think that Lawrence's team gets to see Lawrence's version of transformational leadership. And I've seen firsthand the progression of the people under Lawrence and how far they've come. It goes back to that growth culture that we want to have. Yeah, that would be my answer to how that happens. But absolutely, I got lucky. I got Anthony and Lawrence. I got some other people that I wasn't so lucky on. But Anthony and Lawrence, really, credit to them, took it and ran with it, whereas not everyone can.
Definitely, they're both great guys as well. Um, so Harry, I want to talk about client acquisition and especially trying to break into different markets. So I know quite a few agency owners off the top of my head that have tried to hit the US market. Maybe they're UK based or they're Australian
Mm,
based, and it just hasn't worked. I seen your post recently that you've hit, I think, 500K annual revenue
mm.
in the US, and you've only been there 2 months, and
Yep.
you 3 years to get there in Australia.
Yep.
So, do you think it's the brand you've built? Was there a special client acquisition strategy? How'd you manage that?
Well, like, yeah, the purpose of that post is kind of everyone talks about, without context, wow, 500K in 2 months sounds incredible. I went over to the UK, didn't have any business in the US, and just kind of um, took it off. Um, but there is brand built behind StudioHawk. Like you said, you kind of know us across the pond over in the UK. People know us in the US as well. And when you focus on building a good reputation, that pays dividends in this space, because in SEO, reputation is everything. In most businesses, reputation is everything. Um, but having the contacts, having the people that would introduce me to people and stuff like that, there's no special client acquisition strategy. The one really good thing for Studio is we've got a very unique business model and a good USP, which means that we cut through. It's different than your traditional, all-in-one agency. Um, so that works quite well. But I think just when you're expanding, you just have to think of it a bit differently than everyone else. I think if I hear another, UK agency owner saying that they're going to expand to the US and they're going in New York, and I'm just like, why New York? And they're just like, well, because that's close and it makes sense. It's like, well, yeah, like you're just going to New York because you think that's the big city and you've seen it in a TV show that that's the place to be. But we went to Atlanta. You got to figure out what's going to be best for your business. Don't, again, I always keep coming back to this. Stop looking at your pride and your ego for a second. Is it cool to be like, I'm in New York? Yeah. Um, but is it actually going to be beneficial for your business? I don't know. You have to really ask yourself that.
Awesome. And so you've got a pretty crazy story. Like you were homeless and now you've got
Hmm.
Studio Hawk. So more of a personal question, but what keeps you ticking, and what does the future hold for Harry Sanders?
What keeps me ticking? I just love, you know, big on life by design, like designing the life you want to lead. I'm incredibly grateful for where I've come in my journey from where I was, and I don't ever want to forget my roots. That's why I do a lot of ambassadorial work around youth homelessness. That's why StudioHawk donates hundreds of thousands of dollars to youth homelessness. Um, but I think what keeps me ticking is, the Lawrence and the Anthonys of the world, the Hendricks, so many people, that I can name and can't name that, you have an impact on. And I think that's what keeps me ticking, whether that's in StudioHawk, whether that's in the UK, whether that's, the US, the impact that you can have on people. One of my mentors, Graham, who's been a real help in my life, older gentleman, always told me that the only thing that really matters is the people that turn up to your funeral, not the people that turn up because they feel obliged to, if, they got the invite, kind of have to. It's you want people to turn up that'll fly from London, fly from the US to be there. And they can stand up there and honestly say that you've had a significant impact on their life. I think that's what drives me, the idea of, helping other people get out of, difficult situations or becoming a transformed version of themselves. Um, I think that's really exciting. And I think it transcends any money or glory, because we all know how fleeting that is. It transcends all of that.
Awesome. And again, another personal question. How did you go from kind of the victim mentality that quite a lot of people may have in your situation to being so like you've just described?
I don't really know. I don't think about it too much. Like I never, yeah, no, it'd be a lie. I did see myself as a victim when I was homeless. I was very angry at the world about the cards I got dealt. Like I just felt shitty. I'm like, why me? How did I end up with this? How did I transition that? Frankly, it's not a very romantic answer. I just realized that no one cares. Like that sounds really bad saying out loud, but and I don't mean it quite that way, but I just realized that I could be the victim, and I could do that, and it's a perfectly rational answer and logical and reasonable to say, I ended up like this because I had shit circumstances. But the reality was that I didn't want to live in those shit circumstances. I wanted to change that, and I really just gave it a shot. I just one step in front of the other. I didn't expect it to really work. I didn't expect it to work at all. But I figured I can't really be truthfully the victim to myself. I can tell other people I'm the victim, but I can't lie to myself unless I actually give it a crack. And so I gave it a crack. And I think once it started working, you know, you start focusing less on being the victim and more on where you want to head. And the less you think about the past, the better it is in the future. So I started thinking about where I wanted to be, what I wanted to do, um, and looking at that as a opportunity. I mean, it's awful to say, and I wouldn't wish the experience on anyone, but being homeless is probably one of the best things that ever happened to me. I wouldn't have had the drive or the anything to I wouldn't have matured so quickly, anything like that to end up where I was. But you just have to look at life's experiences like, proving ground sometimes.
And that is a wrap on our first episode of the Agency Growth Club. What an episode to start off the series. I hope everybody got a lot of value from that. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. It'd be great if you could leave us a like, if you could leave feedback in the comments, and of course, if you could subscribe. I'm really going into the direction of this Agency Growth Club. We have got a phenomenal list of guests that are going to be upcoming very soon. And yeah, it'd be great if you guys could stick around and hopefully enjoy every episode we put out.